Hola, comrades! Today's topic of interest, the best 10 television episodes of all time. So long, 2018. As I write this, I say farewell to an interesting but exhausting year, and I look into the future. This may be my last video of 2018, but I'm going to use this opportunity to examine something less ephemeral than the passing of one year into the next. Last year around at this time, I counted down the 10 best games of the year, while giving away a slew of honorable mentions. That made sense because my channel focused primarily on video games then, and 2017 was one of the greatest years in the history of gaming, with games like Breath of the Wild, Xenoblade 2, Mario Odyssey, and Nier Automata releasing to rapturous acclaim. This year, making a video like that would be more difficult. The pickings are slimmer. I undoubtedly could throw together a list of the best games of 2018, but I don't really want to. I certainly don't think it's as important as making a list of the 10 best television episodes ever. However, as a consolation, here are a few games from the past year I highly recommend. Celeste. Released at the beginning of the year, Celeste attracted a slew of indie buzz for its combination of tight, inventive platforming and mature, nuanced treatment of its protagonist's mental health issues. Most platformers are externally focused. It's a genre focused on movement and adventure, but Celeste is inwardly centered. It's introspective. There are no evil kings to defeat here, no tyrannical empire to strike down. The antagonist is the protagonist's anxiety and how it physically manifests itself throughout the game. It's a distinct and powerful work. It would probably be my pick for the best game of this year. Octopath Traveler. It's nice to see a game that's obviously a throwback to the JRPGs of yore, but still manages to innovate and chart its own course. No, it's not as good as the best of the games it's paying homage to. Compared to classics like Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger, it's no more than second tier, but it's earnest and clever and heartfelt. Like Celeste, it has an exceptional soundtrack. While tonally diverse, it coalesces to a luscious, elevated high fantasy sonic palette, capable of expressing both sweeping adventure and aching sorrow. The characters are well-defined and well-developed. I'd expect nothing less from the people behind the Bravely series. It's unapologetically stylish and smart. It's a rollicking adventure. Red Dead Redemption 2. This game had a lot of expectations to live up to, but it managed to surpass them. The level of detail dedicated to even small things most gamers won't notice is remarkable. The ambition displayed in every part of the development process is awe-inspiring. This is not an open world meant to give you what you want. This is an open world meant to test you and break you. Though this game can be exciting and exhilarating, it is always relentlessly brutal and bleak and fatalistic. Just as the Wild West was fading into history during the time when this game is set, so too the characters must confront a world that has no place for them as they venture on quests they know will not end well, even if they cannot admit that, even to themselves.
Should I have killed you, Jimmy Brooks? Me?
But enough of that. Today we're going to talk about television. Though it has become increasingly serialized throughout the last 2 decades, the best series still recognize the importance of the episode. In fact, the best series make even more definitive use of the episode than series of yore. They use specific episodes to craft specific tones and stories that might not be found in other episodes in the series. A great episode is not merely a random piece of a longer story. Rather, it works by itself as a cohesive piece of art, with a clear beginning, middle, and end, and clear themes and theses. They can be pulled from their series and admired on their own merits, though they exist to further long-term stories, and with the exception of pilots, none of which, I will admit, are on this list, they succeed because they draw from what has already been revealed. The best episodes are always distinct. They're tense, and they're challenging, and they're easily distinguishable from every other episode in the series. Though they're but pieces of the mosaic of a series, they have their own formats and approaches, and the series would be markedly lesser if they were excluded. They are lucid, scintillating, and cathartic. Some of them are episodes where everything comes together. Others are episodes where everything falls apart. None of them are episodes that fail to deliver important changes to the characters and the world. They are revelatory. All of them demonstrate how poignant and haunting television can be at its finest. So without further ado, number 10, Long-Term Parking, The Sopranos. The characters in The Sopranos are unaware of what kind of story they're in. They see themselves as these badass gangsters living the high life. They frequently quote The Godfather and view themselves in absurdly inflated terms. Their egos and mouths are frequently unpleasant and unbearable. Because they're so obsessed with this image of gangsterism, an image heavily fueled by machismo, they're unable to see who they really are, that being heirs to a crumbling empire. The glamour of the old days is referenced and sought out, but it's far gone. They're stuck as gangsters not because they necessarily like the job, but because there are enough visceral high points, often accompanied by actual drug-induced highs, to drown out their doubts. They aren't opposed to the idea of changing for the better, but they don't want to give up the money and glamour and dedicate themselves to that goal. The central concept of the show is that changing completely is too hard for most people to commit to, so they wind up making the same mistakes and falling into the same traps, and never actually reaching their goals. I'll talk more about this when I cover another Sopranos episode later on this list, but this concept gives long-term parking its heft. This is because the episode leads, tragically and bitterly, to the death of a character who had sworn to escape, Adriana. Earlier in the episode, she admitted to Chris that she had cooperated with the FBI. She believed she convinced Chris to join her, but instead Chris reveals to Tony what she said, and Tony has Silvio take her into his car under false pretenses, then drives her into the woods and shoots her in the head. In the last seconds of her life, she realizes what is going to happen and desperately crawls away from him. The expression on her face is haunting. Dre De Matteo's work in the entire 5th season is incredible. She plays the role with naivete, uncertainty, tenderness, and heartbreak. But this is her best scene in the entire show. Everything Adriana thought she knew crashes down, and De Matteo conveys brilliantly the sorrow and betrayal and heartache which flash through her in mere seconds. Adriana's death is a watershed moment in The Sopranos. While she is far from ignorant as to what Christopher's job entails, she is still the most innocent major character in the show. She doesn't have Meadows' intellect or Melfi's distance from organized crime. She fell into this life merely because she did not have the power to avoid it. She stays with Christopher even when he does not deserve her. In the sea of cynics, she's an optimist. She stays positive even when everyone in her life lets her down. Her death brings a crushing end to that innocence. This series is about whether Tony, and to a lesser degree those around him, can be saved. And throughout this season, that answer started to look like it could be yes. There was a spark of hope that they could learn from their past mistakes and grow and become better people. This hope is symbolized in the character of Tony B, and like him, it steadily becomes corrupted over the course of the season. Christopher and Tony effectively slam the door shut on the chance that they could change when they kill Adriana. The excuse Tony uses to get Adriana to go with Silvio is that Chris tried to kill himself. Strangely, this is by the end of the show not entirely false, as Christopher's pledging allegiance to Tony instead of his fiancée sets him on the path that ends with Tony killing him in season 6. Number 9. The Firebending Masters, Avatar: The Last Airbender. This is an unconventional favorite episode of Avatar, but from the first time I saw it, I was transfixed, and I have not changed my mind in the dozen or so watches I've given it since then. Since season 1 of Avatar, specifically the episode The Blue Spirit, the prospect of Aang and Zuko becoming friends and allies has been raised. This is the episode that not only capitalizes on that prospect, but sees Aang defeat his fear of firebending not through brute force or learning a simple moral lesson, but through a genuinely cathartic journey of self-discovery capped by him and Zuko, former nemeses, standing back to back and reveling in an outburst of colorful fire breathed by dragons, creatures that were believed to have been hunted to extinction in the Avatar world. No one has to lecture them on the true meaning of firebending, it is merely shown to them and they understand. No words, however eloquent, could have expressed better than that tunnel of fire that firebending does not have to be about destruction and pain. Fire is simply energy, it's heat and light, and while that can be used to destroy, it can also be used to create. As much as I adore the Southern Raiders and how Zuko non-judgmentally guides Katara through her complicated journey of justice and revenge, the Firebending Masters is the better Zuko field trip episode because of the dynamic between Zuko and Aang. Unlike in the other Zuko field trip episodes, Zuko doesn't only need to prove himself to others, he also has to grow himself. Though the most poignant moments of Zuko's character growth come in the episodes immediately preceding the field trip arc, such as when he decides to leave his position as beloved Fire Nation prince at his father's right hand, when he faces down his father, and when he desperately tries to convince Team Avatar to trust him. This is his chance to finally move on from the past. His firebending was extinguished when he switched sides, but here he discovers a new way of firebending, one not based on rage and revenge. The bond between him and Aang becomes so strong over the course of the episode because they both have the same goals. They both not only want to learn the true meaning of firebending, they want to stop their past from haunting them. For Aang, it's burning Katara. For Zuko, it's a whole list of pointless, wretched mistakes made pursuing a life he now rejects. When they succeed, it's a luscious triumph. When Katara taught Aang waterbending and Toph taught him earthbending, they were only teaching him an element. When Zuko teaches Aang firebending, he teaches him not only the element, but also learns about it himself while helping both of them finally bury the errors and flaws that have dogged them in the past.
All this time, I thought firebending was destruction. Since I hurt Katara, I've been too afraid and hesitant. But now I know what it really is. It's energy and life.
Number 8. The Threshold. Halt and Catch Fire. While Halt and Catch Fire may have started as a deeply flawed and kind of annoying show about deeply flawed and incredibly annoying anti-hero Joe McMillan, it by its second season became a masterpiece centering on the relationship between two characters who hardly spoke in season 1, Donna Clark and Cameron Howe. At its heart, this is an optimistic, passionately warm show about broken, imperfect people trying and failing to create the future while finding strength in the bonds they formed with each other while trying to reinvent the world and realizing that although they cannot move past all their flaws, they can mature and learn from their mistakes and grow beyond some of these flaws. It doesn't say that everything will turn out alright, or even that everything can turn out alright. But it does say that things can get better if you ceaselessly dedicate yourself to being better and to forming better relationships with those around you. It's a generally positive show. It's toned more like Atla than The Sopranos, but it is never saccharine. Part of that is because of its mature adult approach. The other part of this is because it is not afraid to grapple with pitch darkness. Case in point, this episode, which revolves around the dissolution of the friendship and business partnership between Donna and Cameron. Donna, her eyes on profit, forces Cameron out of the company without considering whether that will be best for either of them long term. This is apocalyptic for Cameron. At the start of the season, Donna was the one person the notoriously untrusting Cameron trusted absolutely, and she thought the trust was mutual, and was thus devastated when she learned it wasn't. Before this episode, the relationship between them had been shaken terribly, but it was fixable. But this episode shatters that relationship. What's sad is that Donna genuinely does want to apologize to Cameron. She tries to repair the relationship between them at the start of the episode, and she's earnest about it. But when Cameron wants to delay going public, Donna turns on her again. Donna cares deeply about Cameron, but she cares more about success and all that entails. She cares so deeply about success that she can't fathom that Cameron might also care about success but think there's a better path to reaching it. To Donna, this is not a conflict between two partners with different visions for the company. It's a conflict between her, the responsible and mature businesswoman, and a puerile, self-absorbed brat who never compromises. This is false, of course. This may have been more true back in Season 2, but Cameron has changed since then. She does not want absolute control over everything. Rather, she just wants Mutiny to remain her company instead of becoming a flaming, convoluted, directionless wreck that spirals away from her. It is Donna who refuses to compromise, leading to a desperate Cameron calling for a vote on the future of the company. Furious that Donna is congratulating her on her marriage while attempting to push through the IPO without her approval. But every single partner sides with Donna, leading Cameron to resign in disbelief. The relationship between them is one of the best developed in television. It's second only to Don and Peggy in Mad Men. Its forming, dissolution, and reformation are emphatically, lucidly poignant and electrifying. We'll talk about the reformation later. For now, we have the dissolution, and it is disconsolate. Number 7, Made in America, The Sopranos. That brilliant final sequence, enigmatic yet so revelatory, sent viewers and even a lot of intelligent critics spiraling into a state of enraged confusion when Made in America aired in 2007. But as time has further cemented The Sopranos' position as the foundation of modern prestige television, and its reputation as one of the greatest shows ever aired, this finale has rightfully been critically reevaluated. This may not be my all-time favorite series finale, we'll get to that later, but it is the best at being a series finale, in that it perfectly encapsulates the themes of its series while actively and cleverly adding to them. The final sequence so overwhelms the episode that what is often forgotten is just how dark and dreary the rest of the episode is. It's as pessimistic and nightmarish as any episode of the series. It's gloomy at its lightest and mockingly morose at its darkest. The entire series is about the decline of a mafia family, and this episode is the nadir of that decline. What was once a formidable organization has been completely hollowed out. Paranoia is rampant, and disappointment is palpable. Strangely, the character who best exemplifies the downbeat, dour nature of this episode is a character who is not even involved in the mafia shenanigans. Tony's son, AJ. He has a chance to change for the better, but he throws it away with the help of Carmela, who is intent on coddling him and shielding him from real responsibility. As AJ is the youngest major character on this show, being so naive he did not even know what his father did at the start of the series, seeing him ensconced in the family is a sour note to end his character on. And that's the word that best fits the tone of this finale as a whole. It's not only grim, but sourly so, which is why it's surprising, at least ostensibly so, that it ends on what appears to be a relatively upbeat note. The family has dinner at a pleasant diner, their warm colors, Journey's arena rock classic, Don't Stop Believing, one of the most iconically anthemic songs ever released, begins to play. The diner's alight in the darkness. Then the door opens, Tony turns his head, and everything cuts to black. This ambiguity caused a firestorm. Debates over whether Tony Soprano died were widespread. Everyone seemed to wrongly think David Chase had given them a puzzle to figure out. If David Chase wanted to kill Tony Soprano, David Chase would have killed Tony Soprano. He is not a timid auteur. But he deliberately chose to leave Tony's fate ambiguous. This is not the absence of an ending, this is an ending. Tony is going to die eventually. Maybe he dies then, maybe he dies in 20 years, but he is going to die, and he is going to die as the same person he's been throughout the entire series. Tony is never going to change, and he is going to spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, waiting for the end to come. This moment, where he's with his family enjoying a modicum of happiness in a sea of uncertainty, is as good as it gets for Tony Soprano. It's the best and most profound ending the show could have had.
Don't stop.
Number 6. Certified. The Leftovers. One of the Leftovers' best assets is using creative structuring to enhance the content of an episode. This wild, surreal creativity is on full display during Season 3, which is not so much a series of spiritual quests as it is a series of anti-spiritual quests, with every character watching their grand narratives about the world falling to shreds. It's the best season of The Leftovers and one of the best seasons of any show ever, and its greatest hour is this masterpiece, which is told from the perspective of the series' skeptic, Lori. After spending Season 1 as a mediocre character only important because she's important to Kevin, in Season 2 she becomes one of the most interesting and thought-provoking characters in the show. Before the sudden departure, she was a therapist and dedicated rationalist. When it hit, she lost control and found she could no longer find answers for herself or anyone. Because of this, she joined a cult. When she escaped this cult, she became fiercely anti-cult, and her rationalism returned more fervently than ever. She became a necessary counterbalance to the rest of the cast, which seeks grand spiritual purpose. This means she both aligns with Nora and contrasts deeply with her. They are both much more grounded than the vulnerable and uncertain Kevin, which is a major reason why he married Lori, and a major reason why, after he was divorced from Lori, he entered into a relationship with Nora. But the two characters are very different. Nora outwardly abjures spiritual solutions because she wants to build a fiercely rational framework for herself to move beyond the longing and emptiness inside her, but she secretly yearns for a way to see her departed kids, refusing to accept that they're permanently gone. When she's offered such a chance in Season 3, she is initially dismissive, believing she's been lied to, but she's also enraptured, and gradually her rational thinking melts away. This brings her into conflict with Lori, whose rationalism is not an attempt to compensate for emptiness, but a way to fight it. In Certified, Nora convinces Lori to help her track down the scientists who possess a machine that allows for travel to wherever the 2% of people who departed went. Lori believes this is a suicide mission, but she helps Nora regardless. This is not revealed until the midway point of this episode, which is the most brilliantly structured episode in the entire show. It cuts repeatedly back and forth between 2 days, the day when she helps Nora, and the next day, when she is at the house where the central characters have gathered. The cross-cutting is initially disorienting. There are 3 characters missing the next day: Kevin, Nora, and Matt. Kevin does not appear until the end of the episode, but Matt and Nora are with Lori the night before. Thus, the disorienting fog steadily evolves into a mystery. What happened to Matt and Nora between the 2 time frames? Lori refuses to reveal what happened, instead continuing to vent her exasperation at the belief that Kevin is a savior. But her anxiety and self-loathing are not hidden, and when the question of where these emotions are derived from is answered, the entire episode snaps into place with frightening, resplendent clarity. Lori cannot handle the burden of knowing she supported Nora, a woman she cared about and agreed to give therapy to, in a quest she believes is dangerous and wrong. When the characters eat dinner the second day, they discuss which apostle they're most like, and Lori answers Judas. She thinks of herself as the betrayer, not only to Jesus, who in this scenario is Kevin, but also to Nora. She could have tried harder to stop Nora, but she didn't, and whether this is because she finds a cold logic in Nora's desires, or whether she warmly, passionately sympathizes with Nora's plight, not even she herself is aware. Almost every episode in Season 3 sees a character's worldview ebbing away from them, before being shattered entirely. The most obvious examples of this are what happens to Kevin Sr. and Matt, but it plays out differently with Lori. She does not have a grand spiritual philosophy. Ever since she left the guilty remnant, she has thought of herself as the logical one who steers others away from spiritual nonsense. But her behavior toward Nora causes that self-perception to be shaken, and the last shot sees her scuba diving. Based on everything before shown in this episode, especially a conversation with Nora, where Nora says scuba diving is a great cover for suicide, it is reasonable to think that Lori is going to kill herself. But she doesn't, and in the finale she's revealed to still be Nora's therapist. As always in this show, nothing matters more than belief. Number 5. Beyond the Wilds, The Legend of Korra. Rather than expanding outwards, The Legend of Korra expands inwards. It analyzes and investigates Korra as she grows from a well-meaning but brash, arrogant, and naive teenager to a mature, intelligent, and responsible woman and avatar. She's still hot-tempered, but she knows how to use her temper to her advantage instead of having it be her detriment. She stops resorting to fighting to solve all her problems, and this is not because she succeeds easily, or because she can always rely on those who care about her. It's because she suffers. It's because she slams into a problem she doesn't understand or know how to handle, whether that be extremist ideology, or, more devastatingly, poison that takes her months to physically recover from, and years to psychologically recover from. She finds the light in the dark. While most of her recovery storyline takes place over the course of the lyrical and poignant Korra alone, her recovery arc stretches over the entire 4th season. She loses to Kuvira at mid-season because she's not fully recovered, even though she got all of the poison out. Only in Beyond the Wilds is Korra able to fully recover, and in distinctively Legend of Korra fashion, the person whose guidance allows her to recover is the person who poisoned her, Zahir. Avatar is an optimistic, upbeat series about a group of friends saving the world. For the main crew, there is a sense that progress, while difficult, is inevitable if they try their best to improve. Even for Zuko, there's a clearly correct and righteous path for him to take, though he's too consumed by his desire to gain his father's approval to see it at first. But Korra, while ultimately optimistic, is a darker series about a woman wondering what it means to save the world. Obviously, there are threats that need to be defeated, but merely defeating them is not enough. Not even close. Korra's task is to be an avatar in a rapidly changing and modernizing world, which means she not only has to stand against extremism, but identify what to stand for. And she has to do this without much help from her friends, who try their very best but cannot give her the guidance she needs, or her mentor Tenzin, who is a fascinating mentor character specifically because he is flawed and has a lot to learn himself. She also, unlike Aang, does not have help from her past lives, so she has to instead learn from the very enemies she strives to defeat. What happens between her and Zahir is the foremost example of that. Korra is by this point far from inexperienced. She knows that just because Zahir wants to help her doesn't mean he cares about her. She resists his help at first, and only allows him to guide her past her blockage into the spirit world after a spirited and ambitious and incisive conversation that ranks among the best conversations in television. Though he is in chains, he manages to hold power in the conversation, expanding upon his point about how he is able to enter the spirit world despite being imprisoned amidst grunge and darkness, while she can't enter it despite being the Avatar, and despite Republic City being filled to the brim with spiritual energy. But she does not simply allow him to land these blows. She strikes back, talking about how empty his sanctimonious prattling is, considering how his assassination of the Earth Queen in the name of freedom allowed the militarist Kuvira to take power, but eventually she allows him to guide her. And not only does she regain the power to enter the spirit world, her powers become greater than they were before. All the discussion in Season 2 about the Avatar's power to warp the spirit world to their whim comes to fruition when she learns that she can energy bend in the spirit world. She is, in Rava's words, at her most powerful in the spirit world. More importantly, she emerges from her 3-year ordeal with a sense of empathy that allows for the perfect ending to her arc, wherein she convinces Kuvira to step down, not with force, but by appealing to Kuvira's vulnerability. In regards to Zahir, she demonstrates a hard-won maturity by knowing that although the enemy of an enemy is not necessarily a friend, two people do not need to be friends to work toward a common goal.
Let it play out.
I can't!
You can. Accept what happened to you. Don't fear what might have been.
I have no control!
Don't be afraid. Hold on.
Number 4. Goodwill. Halt and catch fire. This is the most poignant depiction of the aftermath of death I've ever seen. Gordon's death in the affecting episode before this, Who Needs a Guy, is a gorgeously, elegantly elegiac depiction of death, but this episode surpasses it. The 3 living characters of Halt's main foursome pack up Gordon's belongings very soon after his funeral. Donna, who as his ex-wife is leading the process, knows she's rushing, but she does not want to drag out what's been trying for not only her, but all of them. He was such an integral part of this series that to not spend an entire episode ruminating on his death and memory would have been inappropriate. It would have also been contrary to the spirit of the show, which cares deeply for the characters not only at their best, but also at their worst. We see both here in regards to both the mourners and Gordon. Though Gordon was a great man, he wasn't only that. In flashbacks that bookend the episode, we see him leave Donna as a younger man, and not come back to her until he's scared her half to death. Though the mourners feel sadness for his death, they feel more than that. They feel so much that they can hardly sort out their emotions. This episode reaches beyond stereotypical depictions of the mourned and the mourning for a more nuanced, heartfelt, uncomfortable, ambitious treatment that does justice to not only the multiplicity and difficulty of the mourning process, but also to the relationships of the others to Gordon and to each other. *Halt and Catch Fire* moved beyond its rocky start and became one of the greatest shows in the history of television, not by adding a slew of additional characters, but by focusing more deeply and thoroughly on the characters that already existed and the relationships between them. Who the characters are and what they hope to accomplish changes quickly, as does their mental states and the states of those relationships. The show is paced much faster than The Leftovers or Mad Men or even The Sopranos, meaning that though the show only lasted 4 seasons, a wide variety of tones and approaches and permutations are considered, and all of these relay new information about the characters. All of these expand the characterizations of these people while detailing how their perspectives change. An interaction between 2 characters in one episode is always different than an interaction between the same 2 characters in the episode before, because the characters are different, if only slightly. They've been changed by their experiences, if only slightly. If the writing was not incredibly sharp, this fast pace would give rise to contrivances, but everything feels so organic and meaningful. The everyday business grind does not mean everything, as the characters learn throughout the course of the series, but when the characters are in the thick of that grind, nothing else seems to matter. So even scenes that don't matter that much in the grand scheme of the series are given great gravitas, because those scenes matter to the characters. This is how the show builds character and relationships. This is how it gives power to not only the core relationships of the series, like the relationship between Gordon and Donna, but also to lesser relationships like the complicated friendship between Gordon and Cameron. Because of this commitment to interweaving the characters so absolutely, the loss becomes not only devastating, but paradigm-altering. The threads come untied. The other characters have depended so heavily on his presence that they don't know how to respond to his absence. But this uncertainty allows the most important bond in the series to be repaired. There is not a single scene in this episode that is less than great. From Cameron being thrust into the role of the mature adult in her conversation with Joni, to Bosworth bringing over chili because he wants to bring the mourners together and because he doesn't know what else to do in the face of such tragedy. But by far the best scene is when Cameron and Donna sit outside the house at night and reconnect. The tragedy has brought them to the same side. They're closer than they've been since Cameron left Mutiny. This relationship was broken viscerally enough that it could not be easily repaired, but it was not so broken that it could not be repaired, and the characters learn this. Almost a decade after the threshold, they finally recommit to each other. Before this episode, they finally realized their years at Mutiny, though only a speck of time in terms of their long and storied careers was the best time of their lives. They finally realized that they were better with each other, but this episode gives them the platform to finally admit that. When Donna breaks down, speaking of how she lost not only Gordon, but also Cameron, her remarks carry tragic gravitas, and then Cameron delivers the most tender, most loving, most direct response possible. I'm here. I very rarely cry, but when she said that, streams of tears flowed down my face. It's one of the greatest moments in television history, and an intimate climax to this intimate episode about grief and wistfulness and mourning and connection.
I miss you too. I'm here.